Hey guys, thanks so much for joining Conscious Conversations. I'm Lauren Douglas. I am joined today by Josh Palau, who is the Chief Media and Activation Officer at PhD. Thanks so much for joining us, Josh.
Thank you.
I met you at Brand Safety Summit. I started following you on LinkedIn, and you're a great follow.
Thank you.
So, I don't know. You have a very interesting voice, and I thought I wanted to just ask you a couple questions. So, the first thing is, one of the things you say in your LinkedIn bio is that your job is to simplify complexity. So, I just wanted to get a sense from you of like, what does that mean to you, and how does that weave into your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, so it's there's a part of this conversation where it'll appear I'm being sarcastic, and I might be, but I don't think I am being.
Okay.
I was on this a long time ago. I was on the sales side, agency side, client side, now back to agency side, and in all of those things, the one thread that always stuck through, and it was mainly when I was, again, when you're an agency, you're dealing with clients or on the client side, is like there's so many companies out there that even though they're embracing digital, their leadership is still several generations back.
Totally.
And if I had to explain live stream shopping and why this is so critical and important, I'd literally use the QVC example, and I guarantee you that executive would get it in a second. So
Totally.
I always feel like there's a way in which you talk to your internal stakeholders and your partners just about like, how would you do this if the internet didn't exist? So whether it's, I was talking recently with a client about some work around connected TV and around brand safety.
Yeah.
And it quickly, as we sort of circled in a very productive conversation, it came back to like, well, how would you do this if the internet didn't exist?
Yeah.
And sort of what we sort of landed on was like, there's just some things you can't guarantee in this world of connected TV.
Right.
And so now it becomes, what risk and what are you willing to accept, in terms of your organization. So for me, it's always been about like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? How do you make it seem, as how do you bear it down to its, the simplest thing, like here's literally what I'm trying to do. And then from there, you can sort of troubleshoot or shoot it down or you're sort of, figure out how to build it up.
Yeah.
But if you're not starting at least from the very simple, like, here's all I want to do, right? I just want to do this.
Yeah.
I think that's where things get a bit more confusing.
Yeah. And from a management perspective, do you do the same thing with your team?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I work with a ton of really smart digital people, so it makes it a lot easier. In prior roles, I've also worked with tons of really smart people. I just think it's the media expertise, which is where my translation. I remember years ago when I was at Razorfish and we had all the J&J search business. Then he wasn't technically the CMO, but he kind of was, and he dragged me to every single meeting. And I kept saying, "Why do you keep bringing me to meetings when like there's this entire team here and like we've been working with you for a year?" And he said, "Because you explained it to me, and I'm a little bit older, and this is all about search, and this is again going back quite some time." He's like, I just need you to explain it to these folks and how search is kind of like the shelf that we have in a store right now.
Yeah,
totally. And so I think it's benefited clients and people I've worked with in terms of just being able to explain that and use that sort of simple approach of what are you trying to actually do here.
Yeah, totally. Cool. You mentioned brand safety, so we can go down that path. What is, I know you've been vocal about calling out the industry for lazy practices or entrenched practices. What are some of the things that you would say we really need to stop doing, especially as we're going into this new year? Like, what is an industry that do we need to really focus on stopping?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So, I don't know if it's, and I'm not trying to split hairs. I don't know if it's stopping or just being more mindful of things.
Yeah.
I think when brand safety started to happen, and it's always sort of and again going back to what I just said before, the brand safety always existed in the offline world. Like for years, P&G and J&J wouldn't buy certain networks, not necessarily for the kinds of safety that we see on some of the platforms with the content that's out there, but just in general, like, like our brand values don't align to advertising on Family Guy, and so therefore we're not going to do it. Yeah. So I think brand safety has now sort of grown into, there's clearly some things we do not want our brands associated with because it's just bad, awful content, not from an opinion standpoint, like it's bad things. I was at J&J during our YouTube shutdown, and it was just a lot of like, terrorism videos. Yeah. And of course we don't want anything there. And I think, but what I think has started to happen, and I think it's really like the hardest part for brands, is what falls into this new space of what I would call, and others, not I didn't create the phrase, responsible journalism. And we could spend hours, which I won't, on that whole topic. But what are the things, like what are the topics that whether it's, just to say it, we all know what we're talking about here, whether it's around elections or vaccines or COVID or like anything that's happening right now in the space like where does that line up? Where does that line up to your brands and what you want to be associated with?
Yeah.
And so I think brand safety has now become this bigger thing than just like that's definitely either offensive or not something we want our brand associated with. To now like bleeding into the world of like what's their opinion? Is that factual? Like even if it is factual, is it something that we want to support? Like,
right.
And I think it makes it a lot harder. And so I think for brands, it's being mindful about where you as a brand and your brand purpose. Or not brand purpose, brand values, where they line up with the places that you place your media.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this show is called Conscious Conversations because the idea is how do you consciously invest? How do you responsibly invest? And like, how do you make those decisions? So I think that it totally makes sense to talk to brands and say, what are your brand values? Let's start there. Right. And then we can go from there and kind of determine what makes sense to you from a media buying perspective. So that's awesome.